Good evening. My name's Heidi Wakeman, and I serve as the Vice President of the Gloucester Writers Center. This is our 13th season and our 6th sold-out show of Fish Tales. What started as story swapping in the little house with the big pencil is now a celebrated and satisfying event for both you, the audience, and for us at the Gloucester Writers Center. Fish Tales is one of our most important events and fundraisers, so thank you for supporting our little nonprofit that could. The Gloucester Writers Center's mission is to honor and celebrate Cape Ann's rich literary history and to empower individuals to engage in the writing and telling of stories in the spirit of civic engagement. Through dedicated volunteers and a hardworking staff, the Gloucester Writers Center continues to be, in the words of Peter Anastas, a working writers' center in a working town. We are committed to diversifying our programming and partnerships while keeping alive the rich history of Vincent Farini and Charles Olson. Tonight, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Mass Cultural Council, Lobsterland Restaurant, and Neptune's Harvest Organic Fertilizer, as well as our co-host, our host, Gloucester Stage Company. And I'd like to thank you for being here. Storytelling is also story listening, which connects us, informs us, and reminds us of our shared humanity, the good, the not so good, and the miracle of being alive. So sit back, enjoy the show, and please welcome Storytellers-in-Residence, Sharron and Nathan Cohen.
Hello. I've talked to so many of you, I know so many of you, that I'm now hoarse, so bear with me. When we first set this theme, AWRY and AMOK, we did not know that it would land exactly on the Ides of March. So, you know, what could go wrong here? But we also didn't know, we didn't expect how many other events would be happening in town this couple of weeks. I mean, everything is happening in town right now. So the fact that more than 200 of you showed up here is amazing to me, and I'm incredibly grateful to all of you. So thank you. Thank you. I'd also like to turn and acknowledge the people in the nether seats. Hello, and this side as well, hello. There are no bad seats in this theater. There are some better ones, but there are no bad seats. So, with that, my son's going to introduce the first storyteller.
The first storyteller this evening is a former physical therapist, Air Force officer, school library aide, bookmobile librarian, romance writer, lighthouse keeper, and my mother. Sharron has a lengthy list of formers and hopes to be around long enough to add a few more to the list. Tomorrow's former includes sharing the Storyteller-in-Residence title for the current Fishtail season with her son. That's me, Nathan Cohen. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Please welcome Sharron Cohen.
Thank you. Thank you. Sadie was nudgy. All day long, her grandfather, who's here tonight, by the way, her grandfather had run the Thatcher Island launch back and forth, bringing visitors to Rockport's Island of the Twin Lights. And at the end of the day, he made one more trip. He brought his family out to the island. They were going to eat supper with the four of us keepers. They were going to sleep in the old Coast Guard house. But first of all, we were socializing in the boathouse. Sadie was 13, and she had this much interest in the Geezer Gab Fest that was going on. What she wanted to do was drive the island's electric truck. And who wouldn't? The island's electric truck was like the love child of a pickup in a golf cart. It was really adorable. And she wanted to drive it. And I said, okay, I'll give you a driving lesson. And I took her up to Ann's Way, which is a beautiful, long, wooded tunnel down the middle of the island. It was the longest, straightest trail on the island. That's why I chose it. The only problem with it, it's one tiny little flaw, was that it came out on a bluff about as big as the stage area, and the end of it was a precipice and a plunge to the ocean below. I wasn't worried. I was ready. I was ready for this. Before we came out of the woods, I cautioned her to slow down and start making a nice right turn around the picnic table, which she executed beautifully. So by the time we picked up the little connector trail back to Anne's Way, I had relaxed a little too much. And by the time I said, ooh, you might want to slow down, we were sailing across Anne's Way. And the truck landed with a thud in a ditch full of blackberry brambles. Neither Sadie nor I were particularly eager to have anybody else know about this adventure. So we spent a considerable amount of time trying to get that truck out of that ditch, and we failed. So we trudged back to the boathouse. And I said, I have managed to get this truck into a ditch. We're going to need your help. So everybody put down their margaritas, followed us back up to Anne's Way, and as we passed the campground, my husband called out to a group of campers. He said, we've got a truck in a ditch. You want to give us a hand? The campers rose as one. The slanting rays of the setting sun glistening off the sheen on their muscular bodies. And they fell into step beside us like a slow-motion cadre of Baywatch lifeguards. This is the way I remember them, okay? When we reached that forlorn truck, they leaped into the ditch, and they picked it up, and they put it back on Anne's Way. And then they picked Sadie up, and they put her in the driver's seat. And I scrambled up beside her, and we went bumping down Anne's Way toward the oil house, where I would eventually put the truck in its bay for the night. But before we changed places, Sadie turned to me and she said, "Best day of my life!" Time passed. Sadie joined boat crew. And all through high school, she was bowwoman on her grandfather's launch. And one day, the launch was on the ramp. We were waiting to load the visitors to take them back to the mainland, when Sadie turned to me and she said, "Do you remember the day you put the truck in the ditch?" And I said, "Oh, Sadie, honey." I took responsibility for that because I was the grown-up. But you put the truck in the ditch. And then I gave her a valuable piece of advice. And I'm going to give every single one of you that piece of advice tonight. If I were Oprah, I'd give you a car. But you're going to get my piece of advice. I said, "Sadie, never, ever give away the starring role in a good story." Thank you. Sadie's grandparents are here tonight, and you can ask them later how accurate that story is. We have 8 more storytellers, each of them in the starring role in their stories. The next one is Carolyn Haines. Carolyn is a lifelong Gloucester resident, retired after a long career in human services. She enjoys walking outside every day, singing in the a cappella ensemble Levin, playing the ukulele, bird watching, and volunteering for nature conservation organizations. She loves an audience. You're going to love her. But her favorite role at this stage of her life is great-grandma to 4 delightful little humans. Carolyn.
Thank you. I forgot my first line. We had a plan. We had a plan that early morning when we drove to the airport. Just like the Donner Party had a plan when they headed to California. And we knew all about that. We had just been to the Donner Museum as part of our grandparents and grandchildren trip to the Sierra Nevada mountains. Now, the Donners made a fatal change in their plan. We weren't about to do that. We were going to be on the deck in Lanesville by mid-afternoon. That was until we walked up to the ticket counter and the agent said, "Your flight's been canceled. We'll get you on the red eye at midnight." "We can't do that," I said. "We got a 5-year-old with us and we just turned in the rental car. You've got to do something. You've got to figure out something else." "Well," she said, clicking her little keyboard, "you and the child can run down the concourse to gate 20 and you might get on. They're about to close the door, so you better hurry. And you," she said to my partner, Paul, "you can't take that flight. You're on a frequent flyer ticket and you're not eligible for that flight. We'll have to figure out something else for you." Well, I grabbed the little girl's hand. Down the concourse I ran, forfeiting the luxurious, leisurely, filling breakfast we had planned, and bingo, we got on. Now, this was back in the day. It was the day before cell phones. It was also the day before TSA agents. And it was the day when the airlines were on the cusp of implementing their new business model. You know, the one where they give you nothing. I said to Maya in my naivete, "Don't worry, honey. Once we get in the air, they'll give us breakfast." Well, when the cart came down the aisle, they chucked a couple of miniature boxes of raisins at us. Maya doesn't like raisins. So after I spent a few minutes trying to convince her that raisins were nature's candy, I'm not proud of it, but I ate both boxes. And then I looked at my ticket, and I discovered we were not on a direct flight. No, we were going to do some time in Phoenix, so we did. We played Where's Waldo and tic-tac-toe, and eventually we got in the air again. And I said to Maya, "Don't worry, honey. This is the longest leg of the flight. I'm sure they're going to give us lunch as soon as we get in the air." Wrong again. I think they gave us raisins again. So we played Old Maid, and then we played a little more Where's Waldo, and on we went until somewhere over the Midwest there was an announcement. Actually, it was a question. "Is there a doctor on board?" And again, "Is there a doctor on board?" And then, "How about a nurse? Is there a nurse on board?" "We have a sick passenger." So I tried to mind my business, and I got out If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, which was a poor choice at that point. And on we flew until there was yet another announcement somewhere over the mid-Atlantic. "We're sorry, but we're going to have to divert this flight. We're going to have to land in Baltimore because of the medical emergency we're having." So down we went, down to the baking hot, humid tarmac of the Baltimore airport. The gurney came on, they took the passenger off, and then we sat there, looking at one another, playing games with children. And we sat there, and it got hotter and hotter. And we looked at one another, and we thought, why aren't we leaving this airport? And then there was another announcement. "We're sorry, but But FAA regulations require that we have oxygen on board at all times when we're in the air. And unfortunately, our ill passenger used the oxygen. And unfortunately also, they do not have the equipment that fits our oxygen at this airport, and they will need to fly it in from another airport. So Maya was playing with her Donner Party paper dolls at this time. Also, not a good choice. When a miracle happened, the woman who was seated next to us came up with a cookie out of her purse, and she gave it to Maya. And she commented, "What a remarkable child." She forgot to mention what a remarkable grandmother had been amusing her all day, but that was okay. And eventually we did take off and head for Boston. And as we approached our landing, it occurred to me that I had the parking ticket in my purse, but I did not have the keys. They were somewhere, who knows where, in another pocket somewhere. So I made another plan. I decided I would go directly to the ticket agent, and I would find out where my car keys were. So we landed. I stacked the luggage into the luggage cart. I stacked the child on top, pushed it upstairs to the counter, and unfortunately, it was dark. Everything was closed. It was so late, no one was working. So I made a feeble attempt to locate the car. And then I hailed a cab, and $100 later, I was in Lanesville. I turned the child over to her mother. I sat on the stoop in the warm dark with a glass of wine and a hunk of cheese. And down the hill came the car. And I wondered, how the hell did he get that car out of Hawk without the ticket? And how much did he have to pay? But that's a story for another time.
Our next storyteller is Connor Carrington-House, who I met in the Rockport Public Schools, where he is a cellist in the orchestra I direct. We took a tour last April to Italy, and there was a leg of that trip where I was sitting next to him on the plane, and that was the first time I really, really realized what a compelling storyteller he is. That was a delightful flight. Connor is a senior at Rockport High School, has been entertaining people since the 5th grade, trying his hand at stand-up comedy in a bid to raise money for summer camp, and Fishtails is his debut in the land of unscripted storytelling. Please welcome Connor Carrington-House.
Well, I find I can tell a lot about humanity by watching some starving kids. So picture this, 12 stupid, starving 15-year-old boys in the middle of nowhere in Maine on the Allagash Waterway. And you might be wondering, how did we get here? So we were 15 years old. We were in the capstone year of our summer camp experience. And we had been the few chosen to sort of be groomed to be the counselors for the next generation of campers. Now, a lot of responsibility had been vested upon us. We were basically to direct our entire summer within the guidelines of 2 sort of extraordinarily difficult trips. One being a 2-week hiking trip, the other being a 2-week canoeing trip. Now, in our infinite 15-year-old wisdom, we decided that a canoeing trip's a piece of cake, right? And so started immediately to plan that and get all the logistics in order. We planned our food, we planned our miles, we looked at our maps, we did all the forms we thought we needed to do, and we planned this thing to a T, right? And we packed up our bags and our vans and we set out and we got dropped off in the middle of absolutely nowhere. and set off on our grand adventure. Now, we had a blast. We went down the river, we sent some rapids, we hiked back up the rapids when we figured out it was the wrong way. And, we just ultimately had the time of our lives for 3 whole days. And it was on that fateful third day where we realized our truly dire food situation. Someone had forgotten to carry the one or grabbed the wrong scooper when we were portioning out our rice and beans and such. But we felt we would be okay. We started rationing as normal humans would do. And we held our discipline, and we were great for like a solid 2 days. And then we sort of descended into this social chaos of like Lord of the Flies. We started rioting and fighting each other and, just ultimately going mad. But there was light at the end of the tunnel as we were getting a resupply on the 7th day. And, a different group of guys had picked the food for that. So, hopefully that'd be all good. Anyway, so skip forward to that fateful day of the 7th day. We were cruising down the river. We saw our resupply bundle lying on the bank. We were like, we're saved. We're good to go. So we look at our thing. It's, it looks kind of small. But we think nothing of it. Our eyes are bigger than our stomachs. This is going to be fine. But unfortunately, upon further inspection, we saw that the resupply driver had made a little bit of an oopsie and picked up the food package for a 3-day trip for a bunch of 9-year-olds that was going out on the same day as we were. And those 9-year-olds got our nice big food package. So needless to say, we were demoralized. But we figured, we're going to be okay. We've made it half the trip. We can subsist on our 400-calorie-a-day Cliff Bar diet. We're going to be all good. And so we continued on. We starved, we bonded, we had a whole life-changing, shaping experience until day number 10, when, lo and behold, deliverance. In the form of a wooden sign on a tree on the side of the river. It said, convenience store. 3.1 miles and a directional arrow. We thought we were saved. We got off the river, sprinted all the way to that convenience store, sprinted all the way back when we realized we forgot the money. And then came the true horrid disappointment of finding out that along with our cutlery and plates and many things that we needed that had been lost due to a capsize in a rapid, our money was also gone. So we dejectedly continued on with our trip. We had 3 days left. And we continued to starve, we continued to bond, we continued to fight, we continued to do all the things you do when you're hungry and annoying. And every night we'd go to bed and think of those gosh darn 9-year-olds fat on our food. So we ended up accidentally traveling into Canada without passports as a nice little end to our grand adventure. We figured our way back. We got back to camp. We all weighed in. About 25 pounds later, we were back in the saddle, ready to go for a nice long hike. But this whole thing really cemented this one idea for me that a boss of mine had tried to impart on me in a former job. And now I religiously live by this principle, or I try to. And that's the, holy religious principle of measuring twice and cutting once. Thank you all.
I am almost the shortest person here. So every time I get up here, I'm going to have to do this. Okay, our next storyteller is Pat Maloney-Brown. Pat taught high school theater and English for 34 years, also sings with Cape Ann's a cappella group Levin, and co-founded, along with Pauline Maselli, the Cape Ann Theater Collaborative of yesteryear. Most importantly, her soul is anchored in Cape Ann. Pat.
I got married at 20 and I asked for a divorce at 25. I taught in the day and my husband decided he wanted to work at night. My parents had given us land and he was building a house, and as the house went up, the marriage was deteriorating. And I remember standing in the shell of this house, 3/4 of the way done, one summer day, and said, I want a divorce. Oh, my parents were devastated. Now, I was an only child and I always had the utmost support. Not this time. And so I called my godmother. I wanted to complain. And in the midst of complaining, like magma, this erupted. I don't know where it came from. I said, I don't act like them. I don't think like them. I don't look like them. As a matter of fact, I've always thought I was adopted. There was a very long pause, and I kept thinking, rhetorical question. My godmother said, I promised your parents I would never tell you, but I promised myself I would tell you the truth if you ever asked. Yes, you are adopted. And I felt like I was falling down through the void, quicksand, darkness. And the first thing that I said to her was, who do I look like? And she said, go look in the mirror, you look exactly like your mother. And she began to tell me the story of Marie. Marie was Italian, and there evaporated my Swedish half. She was pregnant, and she moved from the South Shore to the North Shore. She rented a room in a house next to my godmother, and they became fast friends. My biological father had said to her, Marie, my mother, my biological mother, he said, you know, we'll put this baby up for adoption and we'll get married and we'll have our own family. And my godmother knew a lovely couple, my adopted parents to be, and she brokered the deal, and I was adopted straight out of the hospital. Well, Marie went on to marry my biological father. They had 2 boys. One was only, the older of the 2 was only 1.5 years younger than I. And Marie divorced my biological father. Runs in the family. And she remarried, and she had 2 girls. So as an only child, I now had 4 siblings, 2 full brothers and 2 half-sisters. I'm feeling a little different now. Whew. And so what happened was Marie and the new husband were driving home from a restaurant that they owned and worked together at one night, and a drunk driver hit them head on, and he was killed instantly. And Marie, my biological mother, she languished in a coma for 7 months and finally died. And the 2 boys went to the Italian family in the South Shore, and the 2 half-sisters were adopted by their biological father. Needless to say, this set me off for a year of great turbulence. My parents found out by accident that I was adopted, that I knew I was adopted, and that set them off again. And then I started dating. I dated a lovely man who I taught with, and I dated also a very charming and crazy man. The charming and crazy man said to me one day, I think we should move to Hawaii. I said, sure, why not? I've been divorcing everything. I might as well keep going. So off I went to Hawaii. I resigned from my teaching position. I sold everything I owned, and I was home in 3 months. I couldn't find work. I ran out of money. And I called this wonderful teacher and I said, "Can you please send me plane fare home?" Which he did. And my dear parents picked up their prodigal daughter at the airport, and I lived with them a couple of months. I got a new teaching job. I moved in with that wonderful teacher, whom I married later. Now, he insisted over a year's worth of time that I should find my biological father. And so I called my godmother. She gave me some contacts, and I met my biological father right here in Gloucester at the old Bob's Clam Shack. Now, the first words out of his mouth were, "I can barely look at you. You look just like Marie." He told my brother, the one that was a year and a half younger than me, and he told the Italian side of the family. I was invited to go down and meet them all. And as I was in the midst of them, her 6 siblings, Marie's 6 siblings, they were all babbling. "She looks like Marie, she talks like Marie, she walks like Marie, she laughs like Marie." And I felt that I had a twin, but we only had one body. Well, the next thing was to meet my biological grandmother. And I met my Nana a couple of months later. She was in the room waiting for me. And when I walked into the room, she put her hands over her mouth and said one word, "Marie." I was the exact age of Marie when she died. I was a flesh and blood ghost for 1 minute. And she ran up to me, she threw her arms around me, and she said, "I love you, honey bunch." Now, I had her in my life for 10 years, and I went to the annual Italian reunion of family, some weddings, some christenings. But when she died, the ties began to loosen and break. I still see my brother from time to time. These stories that create for you a time when you were something before and something after, they keep telling you. And every time I tell this story, I know myself a little bit better. And you've given me that gift tonight. Thank you for listening.
Andy Calkins is a lifelong writer and educator whose lucky day job with a national nonprofit allows him to work with spectacular, visionary education leaders seeking to enable every child to thrive. He lives in Gloucester's Bayview neighborhood with his wife Peggy, Olympic-level frisbee catching dog Pops, and for brief shining moments during the year, their 3 daughters and 2 sons-in-law. Andy believes that stories and storytelling are at the heart of pretty much everything. Andy Calkins.
Pat, thank you. That was wonderful in every way. So, I'm the 5th out of 9 storytellers here, so I think that means you can think of me as Hump Day. Can we just give up a round of applause for the first 4 storytellers, the first half of your life? So, anyone in this room ever have a mother-in-law? Living or formerly living? Just show of hands. Just go ahead. Let's see. Yeah, fairly pervasive condition in this room. Anybody among you have a story or two to tell about your mother-in-law? Yeah, also a pervasive condition and a darn good place to look for stories of AWRY and AMOK. And so my story for you tonight has to do with a Christmas about 10 years ago at our house in Bayview between Lanesville and Annisquam, when my mother-in-law, AKA Nini, showed up with a moment of perfect AWRY on Christmas Eve, and then I matched her and raised her with a harbor full of AMOK on Christmas Day. So Nini would have been about 80 back then, slow as molasses, but sharp as a tack. You can think of Nini as a sort of perfectly complex blended wine, but where all the words that we sometimes hear associated with wine all apply at once. So like spicy, oaky, fresh, tart, with a certain tannic nuttiness in the finish. Nini was all of those things. She was also legally blind in those days, but we were sure she could see a whole lot more than what she was telling all the rest of us. So there we were, Christmas Eve, there's a fire in the fireplace. I'm there, my wife is there, Nini is there, our 3 daughters, and future son-in-law. And, like all future son-in-laws, this one wanted to show up well for his future bride and family and grandmother and all that. So at a certain point in the happy hour, Nini starts like twizzling her fingers around in her water glass and with a mystified look on her face, and she says to no one in particular, "Uh-oh." And we all look at her and she says, "Anyone seen my dentures?" And all eyes swivel to the glass that had been right next to hers on the side table, now in the hands of future son-in-law, who has just taken a big glug of wine out of that glass. And he holds it up. And there for all of us to see are Nini's dentures. And without going into too much graphic detail, let's just say it was pretty nasty. And so there's a moment of perfect silence while future son-in-law turns sheet white and on his way to like Christmas colors of green and red, and then bolts for the kitchen. And the rest of us fall on the floor laughing, and then laughing harder when Nini, in her toothless skeletal way, starts laughing too. So to his eternal credit, future son-in-law comes back a few minutes later and shares a laugh with Nini, having chugged a whole 2-liter bottle of Coke, drown the germs. So all of that is set up for what happens the next day, because I have a plan. This was the year of Hurricane Sandy, which many of you will recall really smacked the East Coast, and especially New York City, where our middle of the 3 daughters lived. And it was pretty scary. It was pretty scary for her and for her parents, safe, warm, and dry up here in Gloucester. It was ridiculously scary. And so I had decided that everyone in the family needed to have an emergency survival kit now. And I was going to give them that kit on Christmas Day. And so I did all the research, and I bought all these big sports bags and filled them with like cans of food and the bottled water and the like cranking radio and the flashlight, all that stuff. And the idea was this was going to be the sort of big climax, to Christmas Day, because, right, I was like, this is what a loving father does, I was going to say, I love you so much that I'm going to risk weirding you out completely on Christmas Day by giving you, these survival kits. And then midway through the morning, a lightning bolt hit me right in the middle of the forehead. Nini, I had forgotten to make an emergency survival kit for my own mother-in-law. Talk about an emergency survival situation. This is like code red in the mother-in-law division, Just picture the message that I'm sending here. I love you. I want you to survive if there's a disaster. Oh, Nini, you go sit over here while I talk to these people. This is just not a good look for a son-in-law to have. And so I'm thinking, all right, Christmas Day, what's open on Cape Ann? Nothing. Except right up there in Riverdale, near us, Rich Dale's. And so lunch comes along, and everybody's getting lunch, and I take myself off to Richdale's to see what they have in the way of emergency supplies. And that afternoon, I bring it all out, and I make my little speech, and I hand out these emergency survival kits, and they are kind of weirded out, you know. The daughters are all like, "Dad, you're scaring us right now." But I think they got the message, and that's all fine. And then we all look at Nini, who's like having trouble with the zipper, you know, or whatever on hers, but she finally gets it open. And everybody's thinking, I'm sure, what is she going to do with a cranking radio that she can't even like figure out? But Nini, who can see a little bit more than she's letting on, opens her bag and reaches in, and then a look of like triumph and ecstasy comes over her face as she pulls out and holds aloft the first of what turns out to be 24 boxes of double stuff Oreos. I mean, it was like a total win, you know? And so, you know, we went through probably a quarter of her sports bag that Christmas weekend, and then the rest became Nini's emergency stash, you know, it lasted us into Memorial Day, and everybody went home from that Christmas weekend saying, damn, I wish I got Nini's emergency survival kit. So we lost Nini to COVID in the early days of COVID in April 2020, and it all happened really suddenly. And I have always regretted that I never told her this story, because I know without a doubt how much she would have loved picturing my like moment of white hot son-in-law panic, and then how everything somehow magically turned out okay. And it's made me recognize since then that we all need reminders, sometimes rude reminders, you know, to tell the people we love how much we love them. And for me that year, I got one reminder in the form of a hurricane, and then another one, a total gift in the form of a moment of like near catastrophic forgetfulness that turned into a true Christmas miracle. And so I think that's why I wanted to bring this story to you tonight, to say it out loud in this room for you to hear, for you, Nini, wherever you are, to say to you, I loved you for all of your spicy, oaky, tart, tannic nuttiness, and I still love you. And I hope the story serves as an inspiration to all of you, not to wait, to tell the people you love how much you love them. And for those of you who still have a mother-in-law, don't neglect to do that before it gets to be too late. And don't forget your own equivalent of the double stuff Oreos. Thank you all.
I'm no longer going to fiddle with this. I'm just going to stand up straighter. Gail Seavey. In her past lives, Gail Seavey has been an art teacher, sculptor, Hammond Castle tour guide, member of Center and Main Feminist Art Gallery, and a UU parish minister, most recently in Nashville, Tennessee, right? Yep. She's here with her husband tonight. She is currently a resident of Gloucester, married to Jim Seavey, a mother, grandmother, and docent at the Cape Ann Museum, and a storyteller. Gail Seavey.
Yeah. Well, I'm standing in the Great Hall of the Hammond Castle Museum wearing the required itchy stockings facing a whole huge busload of tourists. And here is a Spanish chest, which allegedly holds the skull of Christopher Columbus. What I want to say is, and allegedly there's a secret laboratory behind this chest in which allegedly John Hammond used radio waves to try to put human bodies that had just died back to life. But we had to stick to the script. So up we go. This is the courtyard. It's supposed to look like a 15th century French village. And see the cloister up there? Hammond wanted it to look like a monastery. He has pictures of him staring out dressed as an evil monk. We were allowed to tell that. But then we went into the next room, the Cardinal Cushing bedroom. I can't even remember what we said there. It was meaningless, except I wanted so much to tell him about the time. Well, it was a picture from the 1930s. Hammond was dressed in Cardinal Cushing's robes and the big hat. And he was officiating at a wedding in the Great Hall, and the lovely groom in the tux was his baby sister, Natalie. But you know, it didn't matter what stories we told because the place has its own vibe. One group I took back down to the Great Hall, to the courtyard, and the last thing we'll look at is this magnificent Romanesque-looking sculpture of Poseidon. I don't have to say he's naked except for the fig leaf, but look at the face. It's a portrait of Hammond himself. And one of the persons on the tour stepped forward and he said, "We want you to know that man there," pointing to Poseidon, "is burning in hell now for the life he lived then." So people in the tour rarely told me what they were thinking. But you know who told me what they were thinking about the castle? Every single person I knew in Gloucester. How many of you here, raise your hand, honest, if you have a story about Hammond Castle that you like to tell? Just raise it. Okay. I can't really see because of the lights, but you hopefully can see each other. I heard stories. Hammond was a genius. He was the spoiled rich brat. That castle was haunted. It was just the best place for parties. And the sexual fantasies, a lot of them. And I could not tell any of these stories, and they couldn't have all been true. I started to dream of castles burning down. But our curator-director, the late, great Naomi Klein, saved the day. She was a medieval art historian, and she started doing shows of actual medieval art. And she called us tour guides together, and she said, "You're not tour guides anymore. You are museum educators. And you can do any program that engages this community in this medieval art as long as you break even." The one thing we knew for sure about Jack Hammond was he liked to dress up. And let's face it, we all wanted to dress up. So we filled that great hall with middle school kids playing Dungeons and Dragons. They were orcs and sorcerers and knights. And we had fairy tale theater camp, bananas, fashion shows. And then, best of all, we figured out how we could dress up. We learned to do living theater. We'd rush in the morning. Who's going to be the lady of the manor? Who's the knight? Who's the serf? One person, Hope, was always the jester. And we got to engage school groups in imagining together that they were in a different place and a different time. Now, all good things come to an end. Somebody running the castle somewhere decided this break-even thing didn't work. They wanted our money, so they fired Naomi. They hired this businessman who kept Machiavelli's The Prince on his desk. And we were back to the script. We all quit, every single one of us, within 3 months, taking our imaginations with us. But doesn't matter who's running the castle. 3 decades after that day I quit, I took my granddaughters to see it. And within 5 minutes, Grammy, you're the sorceress. I want to be the princess. Oh, I want to be the flying pony. The place still has a vibe.
How's everybody doing? All right. Keith McCarthy got his start as a storyteller at his family's dinner table in Long Island, New York. He went on to major in English and communications in college, and for the past 27 years, he has been telling his stories to his 7th grade English classes at Rockport Middle School, where he also directs the after-school drama program. Keith is also proud of his work with the Annisquam Village Players, where he has performed in roles both on stage and off since 2005. In his spare time, Keith is a professional audiobook narrator, having narrated over 40 audiobooks, as well as hundreds of short books used for reading instruction for a variety of educational publishers. After spending 25 years in Gloucester, he now lives in Ipswich with his wife, 2 dogs, 4 hens, 1 cat, 80,000 bees, and a teenager. Keith McCarthy.
Sadly, the bees did not make it through the winter, so no more bees. Other people's kids. So you have to be really, really careful when you have other people's kids that you're looking after. So I first learned this lesson when I was 21 years old, and I was working at a summer camp on Lake Winnipesaukee, and I was taking a group of kids out on a hike, these 9 and 10-year-old boys, and I had another counselor, Chris, with me. It was a really hot day, and so we decided as a reward at the end of the hike that we would take them for a swim. And we were going to go for a swim to the coolest swimming area in the entire White Mountains, this area called Lower Falls. It's really awesome. There's these natural water slides and everything, just really, really fun, like perfect for a 9 or 10-year-old kid. But we get there, and we're looking at the water slides, and we're like, I don't know, we're looking at the kids and looking at the area, and there's not just water slides, but actual waterfalls. We're like, I don't know, they're kind of young, like this may not be the safest place for them. So we decided, like, as a compromise, because they're dying to go in the water, and we're like, we got to do something. So we decided as a compromise that we would take them to this little spot further upstream where there weren't any waterfalls, but there was just some really fast-moving water. And the plan was that Chris and I would stand in the water, it was about waist-deep water, kind of spread out, and the kids would walk about 50 yards down the bank. They would jump in the water, kind of ride the rapids, go really fast, and then we would grab them and pull them out of the water before they got to the dangerous part. Don't get ahead of me. So we're pulling the kids out, everything's going great, and then, they're a kid, they're supposed to go one at a time, but they didn't. Like 3 kids jumped in at one time, and we're pulling them up to the side, and this little kid, Tristan, gets past us. And I wasn't too concerned at that point because just past us, most of it was fine. Like most of it were just sort of natural water slides and everything was great. But there was one tiny little spot off to the right where there was a waterfall about 6 feet and there was, shallow water, rocks at the bottom. Then it flattened out for maybe 20 feet or so, and there was another drop after that. And so, but as long as he stayed to the left, all was good. So I'm like, Tristan, stay to the left, stay to the left. And he's like, what? Like, hey, buddy, Tristan, go to the left, stay to the left. He's like, what? And he keeps on, he's heading right. I'm like, Tristan, go to the right, I'm going to the left, go to the left. He's like, what? He doesn't hear me. And I see his head go over the edge. And my heart just went in my throat, and I thought I had lost him. Like, I'm running through the water to get over there as fast as I can. I literally thought that he was dead. I'm crying, running through there. I get there, I look over the edge, and I see he is clinging on to a rock in the spot where it had flattened out, but there's another drop coming after him, and he's just clinging on to this rock and holding on, like, hang on, Tristan, I'm coming down, hang on, buddy. And there's just sheer rock walls on either side, and I managed to climb down on one side, and I get in the water, and it's about chest deep, and the water's moving really, really fast. So I'm trying to hang on to the side of the wall, but it's really, really flat, this flat rock wall, and I'm trying to reach out and grab Tristan. My plan is I'll pull him onto to the side of the wall, and somebody can maybe pull him out of the water. So I'm hanging on the wall, I'm like, Tristan, grab on. He's like, okay. He grabs my hand, and I start pulling him to the side, and the force of the water pulling him, pulls me, and I lose my grip on the wall, and now we both, hand in hand, are heading to the next waterfall. And then right before we go over the edge, I see this rock overhanging over my head. I grab the rock, I'm holding on to him, I'm holding on to the rock, and he's like, don't let go of me! It's I got him moving, I've got you, buddy, I've got you, don't worry, I got you. He's like, don't let go, don't let me die, I've got you, buddy, don't worry. And I'm hanging onto the rock, and I'm hanging on to him. But I realize that I can't do this for much longer. I'm losing my grip on the rock. The water's moving really, really fast. And I realize I have a choice. I can either let go of the rock, and we both go over the edge, or I can let go of Tristan. And I always thought, when presented with this kind of a situation in my life, that would be the heroic, somehow guy who kind of pull it all together. I let go of Tristan. He didn't slip. It wasn't like, oh, I let go. I let go of his hand. And then, so I'm still hanging on, but the water's moving really, really fast. I can't even pull myself up at this point. I have no strength left, and I have to let go. So I let go. I go over the edge as well. I land. I get in the water, and my head goes up, and I see Tristan, and he looks totally fine. I'm like, oh, thank God. And he looks at me and goes, you let go of me! I know, I'm so sorry. I did, I let go. There was no two ways about it. I'm so sorry, Tristan, I'm so sorry. It's like, you let me die! I'm like, oh, I know. Fortunately, we were both okay. He was totally fine. He was 9 years old. He was very tiny. The water was shallow. He didn't go very deep. I was much bigger. I went deeper. I had some cuts and bruises, but I was fine. Strangely enough, Tristan never came back to camp the following summer. I don't know. I went on to teach. I teach middle schoolers now. It's a funny story now, but I will say that that boy's face, as he's looking at me with sure terror on his face, a look of someone who feels like they are going to about to die, him screaming to me, don't let go of me, don't let me die, that is burned into my soul forever, and it is with me every moment that I'm with the middle schoolers under my care. And I have learned that you have to be very careful with other people's children. Thank you.
They keep getting taller. Julianna Hull is an honorary resident of Gloucester, volunteering each summer on Thatcher Island. She didn't wear her shirt, however. During her day job working as a florist, she hears many people's stories, good, bad, and funny, and she figured it was about time to share one of her own. Julianna Hull.
It's actually pretty good. Yeah, it's perfect. There we go. Apparently height doesn't run in the family. I hate asking for help. It prickles at my skin like a wool sweater, just a little too itchy for true comfort. And my parents raised me to be pretty self-sufficient. So when I set off on a cross-country road trip at 22, I did so with youthful confidence and just a tiny bit of stupidity. I drove out of Phoenix, Arizona on a cold December morning, and I had a long day ahead of me, beginning with a 4-hour drive to the south rim of the Grand Canyon. I'd spend a couple hours there and then continue on to Death Valley, 7 hours away, where I had a hotel for the night. The timing was gonna be tight, but I was young and stupid, and sure I could manage it. When I arrived at the canyon, it was astounding. No words describe the size, the color, and I did what everyone else does. I pulled out my phone and I started taking photos. With all the beauty out before me, I will admit I lost track of time. And as the sun got higher and higher in the sky, I raised my phone to take a photo, and my screen went black. It was at that moment that I realized I had left my phone charger in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, this may seem inconsequential to some people. I can read a paper map, thank you. But I had a 7-hour drive through the desert in the dark. Paper map was not gonna cut it. So I knew what I had to do. I had to ask for help. I trudged into the visitor center, and I was greeted by a dainty, bird-like woman. Her name tag read Doreen, and she perched behind the desk. She looked just like my grandmother. Oh God, I'm gonna have to explain to a woman who has probably never used a phone to navigate what I am going through. I explained my situation, my face flushed with embarrassment, my stomach in absolute knots. She just looked at me and smiled and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart, I've got you." Next thing I know, there is a flurry of activity as park rangers and volunteers come and go, each one being asked 2 questions by Doreen. Do you have a phone charger? Do you know where to find a phone charger? And then she told each one of them my story. I was mortified. With all the commotion, you would have thought I had lost a child, not a flimsy piece of plastic and wire. I was hustled out the door by Doreen into a waiting ranger's truck. And as we zipped through the park following the winding roads, I could hear the radio crackling on and off as people called in. Nothing at the South Lodge, nothing at guest services, until finally, victory. Just when I thought I had lost hope, we found one. We pulled into the parking lot and a woman emerged from the gift shop, phone charger held aloft like some holy grail. In that moment, my embarrassment had turned to gratitude and my discomfort to joy. See, I was wrong. I had hated asking for help because it made me feel small and weak. It made me, in the worst cases, feel stupid. But there is so much joy to be found in asking for help, in finding solutions with other people, in shared successes, in making your story part of something bigger. It's what being human is, making those connections and becoming a part of someone else's story. So now, every now and then, I think about Doreen and I think about those other rangers. And I hope that someone out there is telling a funny story about the girl who lost her phone charger. And I hope they are the hero of it and that it brings them joy.
That was 8 stories you've heard. You have one more. Nathan Cohen of Gloucester is a multi-instrumentalist performer, composer, and conductor. He is the director of orchestras for the Rockport Public Schools and an adjunct professor of music at Endicott College, where he directs the chamber music ensemble. Cohen co-founded the neo-soul cabaret band What Time Is It, Mr. Fox? But all of that is nothing nothing compared to the fact that he is the father of my grandchildren.
Southern California. Once a year, my wife's grad school friends gather for a little bit of urban camping they call surf church. And my wife and I joined them one year just north of San Diego, and we pitched our tents right in the parking lot on this cliffside overlooking the rolling waves of the Pacific Ocean. And we made this huge bonfire, and we sang songs, and we played music deep into the night. And early the next morning, our friend Brent, he got up with me to take me surfing, my first time surfing, my first communion at surf church. And he lent me a wetsuit, but we had to borrow a surfboard for me. And I'd met this really lovely couple the night before, Mary and Tim. They had 2 kids, and Tim's gorgeous surfboard was leaning up against his car. He was still sleeping, but Mary was puttering around the camp. And so Brent asked Mary, would it be all right if we borrowed the surfboard? And Mary hesitated. And you know when you first meet somebody and you don't quite know the way that they talk and you don't know the space behind a hesitation like that, what she said was, okay. And we said, thanks so much, and we grabbed the board, and we hiked down to the beach. And the very first time I tried to stand on the board, I completely misjudged my center of gravity, and I pitched forward. And when I came up out of the water, Brent had this look of horror on his face. And I looked at myself, I was like, am I broken? I was fine. And then I saw the board, and where I had leaned forward, I had nosed the board into the sand, and the surfboard had shattered completely in the front. And it was like a cartoon spring unsprung, and the orange foam inside was protruding like organs in a fatal accident. It was gruesome. And Brent was talking really, really fast. He was saying, this is my fault, I'm taking responsibility, this is not your fault, don't you worry, it's my fault, this is my fault. And I didn't quite understand what was going on. We were both adults, we both had jobs, this was crappy, and it was going to be an awkward conversation, and probably a very expensive morning, but I wasn't quite tracking the whole situation. And we went back up to the camp, and my wife saw us and she said, it's just a thing, right? Had I known Mary a little bit better, I might have understood in the space behind her hesitation that her marriage to Tim was not going super well of late, and had not been for about a year. This was a really tough time for them, and I might have understood that Tim had been spending a huge amount of time by himself in the garage processing this difficult time, and that the activity that he had chosen was to build a surfboard from scratch. This talisman for this difficult period that I had just broken open and spilled the contents of all over this cliffside. And when Mary saw the board, she said, oh, he's going to divorce me. And it didn't sound like she was kidding. And Tim came out of the tent about this time, and he took in the scene, and he saw the board, and he didn't say anything at all. He turned and he walked away, like capital A, away, and I don't recall that he was wearing any shoes. He just left. Brent took the surfboard and he threw it in the car and he said, I'm going to fix this, this is my fault, this is not your fault, and he drove away into town. leaving me and my wife and Mary standing on this cliffside with the pounding waves below us. And I pleaded with Mary. I said, let me be the villain in this story. We have to leave right after lunch. You guys never have to see me again. Please let me be the asshole in the story who came and broke something beautiful and then disappeared. Brent returned. The board was unrepairable. He spent a small fortune buying a replacement board. And sometime around lunch, Tim reappeared like a character emerging from some pilgrimage. And he came back up, and the congregants of church sort of formed a circle around him. And we all waited for the shit to hit the fan. And then Tim delivered what I can only describe to you as a sermon on forgiveness. And he forgave me and Brent, but I realized really quickly that that's not what this was about. He was talking to his wife, and he was talking to himself, and it was really about them, and it was about his children. And the night before at the fire, his children had been playing, right at the edge of the firelight, where the light of the fire meets the darkness, right in that liminal space where kids often play and kind of watch what the adults are up to. And I was thinking about his kids in this year and what it would be like to watch your parents go through that. And it felt a lot like maybe that edge, that space between light and darkness. And I have always cast myself as the villain in the story. But he leaned all the way in. It was really something. And I called Brent recently, and I said, whatever happened with Tim and Mary? And it turns out they are still married. They are doing really, really well. I know, I felt relieved too. And though I have always felt like the villain in the story, when I heard that, I thought maybe there is a chance that I played a different role in that story. And I don't know that for sure, but one thing I can tell you for sure is that sometimes a thing is not just a thing. Thank you.
Big things to break down fast, and nothing to last. Americone baloney, Americone baloney, Americone baloney, Americone baloney. Big things to break down fast.